Hello and welcome back to my 10 favorite people. Hope you're doing well. I'm incredibly excited for today's video because, as I'm sure you're all well aware, as of this morning, the spot Ethereum ETFs have officially gone live, and I'm already seeing a lot of narratives and FOMO being spread about how this is going to be the catalyst for alt season and how this is your last chance to buy altcoins before they 10x or 100x. And of course, those same people were calling for alt season over here. They were calling for alt season at our local high in May. And of course, the loudest alt season calls were in the beginning of April when altcoins were at their local peak before a 50 to 70% sell-off. But we've known for quite a while on this channel that the only thing that results in alt season is a mania phase for Bitcoin, where Bitcoin enters price discovery, bringing a lot of new flows into this market. And that only happens when we see a prolonged devaluation in the US dollar, as represented by the US dollar index. And this is exactly why we cover macro so often on this channel, because instead of trying to keep up with the latest narrative and is that going to be the catalyst, or is it going to be the Bitcoin conference that's going to be the catalyst for this mania phase and alt season, all we have to do is focus on what's happening with monetary policy and the US dollar index to figure out when is Bitcoin really going to enter that mania phase and when are we going to get that alt season that everybody has been waiting for the past 3 years. And now we have to keep in mind that the US dollar index is driven by two things. For one, it's the international risk off asset. So during times of uncertainty and fear, you'd expect to see more investors flock to dollars. For example, we saw Joe Biden drop out of the United States presidential race. And even though a lot of us saw this coming, markets hate uncertainty. And this just added to the uncertainty between now and the November election. So we could expect that to put a little bit of upward pressure on the US dollar index. But of course, the more important variable is what's happening with the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, because whenever we see more rate cuts getting priced in, we see that put downward pressure on the US dollar index as the Fed is anticipated to be more dovish. But whenever we see rate cuts get pushed back or markets start to price in rates being higher for longer, we see that result in rallies in the US dollar index. And that's why we keep such a close eye on monetary policy and rate cut expectations. So for me, this paints a pretty clear picture. We're expecting a lot of uncertainty surrounding the presidential election coming in November. So it's hard for me to envision some type of amazing rally or major alt season until at least October. That's also when seasonality for risk assets gets a little bit better. And of course, even though we're expecting the first rate cut in September, we're not expecting the Fed to really start getting these rates lower until more towards Q4 of this year. So we have both the election and Fed easing lining up for Q4 of this year. Of course, that's also why we keep an eye on the economic data as we get more and more labor prints showing weakness in the labor market. We'd expect the market to price in more Fed easing, and same thing with inflation. Core PCE is the Fed's preferred measurement, and as long as it's in a downtrend, that's good for rate cut expectations being sooner. But this still feels like it's going to take a while to actually get priced in once we finally do start seeing those rate cuts. So for now, that's why I still have that normal cycle as my base case. I'm still expecting a lot of chop with summer seasonality, and I don't expect anything amazing to happen until we get closer to that October timeframe. And that also happens to align very nicely with the presidential election in November, where we're going to be able to put a lot of this uncertainty behind us once we have a winning candidate. But for now, I'm just expecting a lot of chop like we normally see in Bitcoin summers, and I'm expecting this to take a bit longer than many people expect, because I don't think this is going to be something that's going to be catalyzed by an ETF launch or by someone saying something at a conference. I think we're just seeing what Bitcoin normally does during its choppy summers, and I think we're seeing what markets normally do during these periods of uncertainty. And this isn't just something that I'm making up based on vibes. This is actually something we're seeing in the data. Retail demand for Bitcoin has hit a 3-year low, and Google search interest for Bitcoin is down almost 60% in just 4 months since Bitcoin hit that all-time high of 74K in March. So we're really seeing that even with all of this excitement and the spot ETFs coming and what Trump is saying and all the excitement around what he's going to announce at the conference, retail interest is still quite low. And perhaps you could call that a bullish thing because it means we're able to buy at these prices before excitement, euphoria, FOMO, and that mania phase really comes back in full swing. But it also means that we're likely not going to see anything crazy bullish happen in the short term until we see some interest come back into this market. And even though a lot of people think the conference is going to be what catalyzes that, I do not. Every single conference like this that has been heavily rumored and had all this anticipation going into it ended up being underwhelming in terms of price action, and I have no reason to believe this conference is going to be any different. I'd be happy to be proven wrong, but as of right now, I think it's being incredibly overhyped, and I don't think it's going to deliver on the expectations that everyone has going into it. And as we said last week, markets hate uncertainty, so it's no surprise the S&P 500 still hasn't really done much yet since that bearish engulfing candle last week. And I think a lot of this really has to do with this uncertainty surrounding the election. So this seems like the perfect time to see a bit of a cool off in the S&P 500. Maybe we come back down and retest that 20-week moving average. Again, this aligns nicely with seasonality as well. And of course, we know that Bitcoin and the S&P 500 tend to be quite correlated, and Bitcoin has been in a downtrend for a couple of months now, so it wouldn't be that surprising if the S&P 500 started cooling off as well, which would also result in a larger prolonged correction for Bitcoin. And all of this makes a lot of sense and aligns very nicely with all of this timing and uncertainty going into the election. And I don't expect the S&P 500 to have any major rallies until a lot of this uncertainty gets sorted out. As for Bitcoin itself, it's trying really hard to hold above the mid-level of our 3-month trading range as well as that 20-week moving average. Of course, as long as we're above there, there's no major warning signs quite yet. But what has been surprising is we saw $526 million coming into the BlackRock spot ETF yesterday, but then price was still down. And what's really interesting about this is the last time we had an inflow into the ETFs that big on a single day was around June 4th, and that ended up being the local high for a couple of weeks. And if we go to our highest inflow day before that, that was March 12th, which has been our local high over the past few months. So it's interesting that these highest inflow days where price ends up being flat end up marking out a local high for the following few weeks to months. So it's going to be interesting to see if that happens this time around. And perhaps that could be that we're still seeing some sell pressure from Mt. Gox. Again, this is short term and we expect it to get sorted out in the very near future, but I don't know what's going on with these huge inflows not resulting in price going up. Is it because we're seeing some sell the news surrounding these Ethereum ETFs going live, or is it people taking profits before this potential sell the news event with the Bitcoin conference? Really weird to see these record inflows not resulting in a price increase, and it's weird that we've seen local tops the last 2 times this has occurred. So I'm going to have a close eye on this to see if it happens once again. And of course, we're going to continue to monitor what's happening with the Mt. Gox repayments, because this is one of our bigger sell pressure dynamics right now. And of course, similar to Bitcoin, Ethereum is trying to hold above its 20-week moving average and 6-month trading range mid-level. And of course, it's going to be very interesting to see what the inflows look like today, because I would expect the market to react relatively aggressively based on how those inflows end up looking. And as for Solana, also above its 6-month trading range mid-level, also above its 20-week moving average. But of course, its price action is going to depend very heavily on what happens with Ethereum and its ETF inflows, and of course, what happens with Bitcoin. So for now, my portfolio remains unchanged. And of course, I've noticed that every single time I take profits at resistance, the market ends up rallying. So I sold some Ethereum here. We ended up getting a huge rally, sold some Ethereum here, market kept rallying. So you have my word that if we do end up approaching resistance once again, again, I'll consider selling some more Ethereum so that everybody gets to enjoy another major green candle and roast me along the way. Very happy to take that hit for the greater good of this market. But for now, we have to see what happens with Bitcoin at this 20-week moving average and whether or not it's going to be able to hold this support. And we'll see if this Bitcoin conference that everybody has been hyping up actually lives up to the expectation. Regardless, this is definitely going to be an exciting week full of catalysts, so we'll see what ends up happening. And of course, no major signs of worry as long as we maintain this reclaim that we had last week and stay above that pivotal 61.5K range low of this 3-month trading range we've had. Of course, you guys know that I'm not expecting Bitcoin to go much lower than the low 50,000s, but I'm still open to it and would be very happy to add at those prices. But generally on a longer time frame, I think Bitcoin is in its fair value range where you're not getting an insane discount if you're buying here, but you're also not selling at the best price if you're deciding to sell here, unless you have your own reasons for doing so. But of course, in the longer term, I think this is a longer reaccumulation and consolidation phase before we see expansion in Q4 going into Q1 and Q2 of next year. And I'm bullish on Bitcoin in the long term, just like I'm bullish on the S&P 500 and other risk assets, because I expect currency devaluation and money supply expansion to continue. But anyway, let me know what you expect. Is alt season happening imminently like Twitter and YouTube will have you believe? Is this Ethereum ETF launch going to be a huge success? And is Trump going to say something at the conference that makes everybody incredibly bullish Bitcoin and causes this huge FOMO rally that's going to send us straight to 6 figures like everybody is talking about? Or will it end up being an underwhelming sell the news event that ends up resulting in a larger correction? Would love to know what you guys expect. Thank you so much for the support on the recent videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.